The planet Karinfor was quiet, dusty, and forgotten. It sat at the edge of the galaxy where no trade ships passed anymore. But in the center of its dead city stood a sword, an ancient sword stuck in stone, taller than most warriors and glowing faintly with a soft blue light. Aliens from many worlds had come here. Some were strong, some were smart, some were kings or generals. All of them had tried to lift the sword. None had succeeded over time. The sword became a story, a joke told in taverns and among young fighters. "Try your luck," they laughed. "Maybe you're the chosen one." But the truth was always the same. No one could lift it. Every year, a festival was held at the base of the stone. Crowds gathered, music played, and challengers came one by one. They would grip the hilt, grunt, shout, and fail. The sword never moved. This year was no different. The festival began with noise, laughter, and excitement. Vendors sold glowing fruit and fried lizard meat. Children wore toy swords on their backs and shouted, "I'll lift it one day." In the crowd stood a tall figure, wrapped in a dusty brown cloak. He wasn't a local. His skin was pale, his eyes a deep human blue. His name was Jace, and he was just passing through. Jace had landed on Karen 4 for fuel and water. His ship was old and slow, and he wasn't a soldier or a hero. He just liked old ruins and quiet places. When he heard about the sword, he didn't laugh like the others. Instead, he walked closer. Some aliens watched him and smirked. "Another fool," one said. "Watch his arms snap," another joked. Jace ignored them. He stood before the stone and looked up at the sword. It was beautiful, not because of gold or gems, but because it felt alive. He reached out slowly and gripped the handle. It was cold, colder than ice. For a moment, he felt nothing. Then, something pulsed inside the sword, like a heartbeat. The crowd went silent. The sword's blue glow turned brighter. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through their bones. Everyone watched in shock, eyes wide, mouths open. The sword moved, only a little, just an inch, but it moved, and it moved for a human. Jace quickly let go and stepped back. His hand burned slightly, but it didn't hurt. He looked around. Every alien was frozen. The music had stopped. The laughter was gone. Velmira, a tall alien with silver scales and sharp yellow eyes, pushed through the crowd. She was a historian and scholar, not a fighter. She stared at Jace, then at the sword. No one has ever made it move," she whispered. "Guess I got lucky," Jace said with a small smile, but he knew it wasn't luck. The sword had responded to him, not just his hand, but something inside him. Guards moved forward, unsure if they should arrest him or protect him. The crowd began to whisper. Some were amazed, others were afraid. One alien growled. He must have tricked it. Jace raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "I just touched it." Velmira stepped beside him and looked into his eyes. "You are human," she said. "Yes," Jace replied. "Then we need to talk," she said seriously, above them. Clouds started to gather, though the weather was clear moments ago. Lightning crackled faintly in the distance. The sword glowed again, brighter than ever. The wind picked up, lifting Jace's cloak and making the banners flap wildly. Something had changed, and everyone felt it. The sword that chose no one had finally moved, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Asterisk, the news spread fast. By the time the second sun had set on Karen 4, the story was already echoing across nearby systems. A human lifted the sword, they said. No one else ever made it move. They whispered in every market, spaceport, and station tavern, in the dusty library beneath the old temple. Velmira moved quickly. Her fingers brushed across stone tablets, old scrolls, and glowing data crystals. She was not just any scholar. She was the last speaker of a nearly extinct alien language, a language used by the original builders of Karen 4, and deep in one of those forgotten texts she found it, a carving nearly worn smooth. Hidden behind a cracked pillar, it showed a creature with 2 arms, no scales, flat face, just like Jace. Beside it, The sword hovered in the air, glowing brightly. The translation was rough, the words old and strange, but the message was clear. Only the fireless child of distant origin shall wake the blade. And when the blade sings again, the forgotten ones will return. Valmira's eyes widened. Fireless child, many scholars once thought it meant weak, but humans had no internal energy, no radiant aura like other races. Yet they burned with something different, something no one could explain. She didn't sleep that night. Outside the temple, guards gathered, crowds buzzed, and rumors burned like wildfire. Some believed Jace was a chosen one, others called him a fraud. A few even claimed the sword moving was the start of a new war. Jace, meanwhile, stayed quiet. He wasn't looking for power or fame. He only wanted to understand why the sword had responded to him. He sat near the pedestal, staring at the blade. Watching it faintly glow, Valmira found him the next morning. She carried an old holographic slate and spoke softly. "I found something," she said. He looked at her, tired but alert. "Go on." She showed him the image of the human figure holding the sword. "This carving is thousands of years old," she said. Jace leaned closer. "That looks like me." "Yes," she nodded. "And the prophecy says someone like you would come." Jace stood slowly, a mix of fear and curiosity in his eyes. "Why would aliens write a prophecy about a human?" he asked. Valmira took a breath. "Because maybe your kind were here long before ours." The idea shocked him. Humans had only recently entered this region of space. Could it be possible that ancient humans had reached this far before? And if so, what happened to them? Suddenly, a loud horn blasted across the city. Dozens of armored vehicles hovered in from the skies. The High Warlord of Karen IV had arrived. He stepped out, tall and covered in gold armor, his voice sharp. "Step away from the sword, human," he ordered. Jace raised his hands, calm but firm. "I didn't take it," he said. "I only touched it. That is enough." The warlord growled. "You've disturbed the order." Valmira stepped forward, holding the tablet. "This prophecy proves he belongs here," she said. The warlord sneered. "Ancient nonsense." He turned to his soldiers. "Arrest them both." Before they could move, the sword pulsed again, brighter than before. It sent a shockwave through the air. The guards were thrown back, stunned and gasping. The warlord fell to his knees, clutching his chest. Jace hadn't touched it this time. The sword reacted on its own, like it was protecting him. Gasps echoed around them. Some aliens ran, others dropped to their knees. The sword had chosen, and it had spoken, in its own silent way. Valmira looked around and whispered, "This isn't just about lifting a weapon." Jace turned to her, confused. "It's a signal," she said. "Something. Or someone is going to answer it." Above them, the clouds spun slowly, unnaturally. Stars shimmered with strange colors. Far beyond this world, in forgotten corners of the galaxy, old machines blinked to life, their signals now awakened, and deep beneath Karen IV, hidden below layers of rock and time, a sealed chamber opened for the first time in 10,000 years. Inside it, a message waited, written in human tongue, and it began to glow. The sword stood silent again, but everyone knew something had changed forever. Jace wasn't just a lucky visitor anymore. He was a symbol, and symbols could either unite a planet or tear it apart. He didn't want fame. He didn't want crowds watching him like he was a god or monster. So with Valmira's help, he left the city quietly. They took an old sand glider and moved toward the ruined zones. Ruins stretched far across Karen IV. Once long ago, this planet had been full of cities, towers, and lights. But now only broken walls and buried machines remained. Valmira guided Jace to a hidden place beneath a shattered dome. It was quiet inside, a forgotten chamber deep below the surface. Old stone walls showed carvings of war, spaceships, and figures like Jace. At the center was a metal platform with strange cables and tubes. On it lay another sword, but this one was burned, twisted, broken. Jace touched one of the carvings. It showed a battle where thousands of aliens fought, and above them, a single figure stood with the glowing sword raised. The enemy was not alien, it was darkness, shaped like living shadows. Who were they fighting? Jace asked quietly. Velmira shook her head. No one knows. But these ruins are older than any species we know today, she added. Jace stepped forward and placed his hand on the platform. The moment his skin touched the metal, a spark shot out, then flames burst upward from the broken sword nearby. But these flames didn't burn. They danced in the air like they were alive. Velmira gasped, stepping back. Jace stood still, the flames surrounding him but not harming him. In that moment, visions poured into his mind. Images too fast to follow, too powerful to forget. He saw stars dying, ships falling into black holes. He saw a young man, a human, raise the sword against the darkness. He saw a fleet of warships fleeing while something chased them. And then, he saw the sword sealed into stone on Corinne 4 waiting. When Jace opened his eyes, the flames were gone. His heart raced like thunder. He dropped to his knees, breathing hard. I saw everything, he whispered. Velmira rushed to him. What did you see? She asked. Jace looked at her, still shaking. It's not just a weapon, he said. It's a key. A key to what? Velmira asked. Jace stood slowly and looked toward the surface. To something very old and very dangerous, he said. I think it was left behind to stop something, or to wake something up. Meanwhile, in the city above, tension grew. The High Warlord recovered from the shock the sword gave him. But now his pride was wounded, and fear twisted inside him. He declared Jace a threat to peace, and ordered his capture. Small teams of hunters were sent out to find the human and bring him back, dead or alive. One such team followed the sand glider trail into the ruins. Their leader was a fierce alien named Stor, a killer who loved chaos. Night fell over the broken dome. Jace and Velmira lit a small fire and sat near the glowing sword again. But their peace ended when a sudden blast shook the ground. The hunters had found them. Blaster fire rained down from the walls above. Jace grabbed the sword, not knowing what to expect. The blade didn't just glow, it burned. It roared to life with a flame so bright, it blinded the attackers. Jace raised it, and the fire moved like it was part of him. He swung once, and a wave of heat knocked Stor across the chamber. The hunters screamed and ran, some crawling away with scorched armor. None could believe it. The sword was fighting with him. Velmira stared, amazed. You didn't learn that, she sighed. No, Jace replied, staring at the blade. It's teaching me. As the fire faded, the sword cooled in his hands. It didn't feel like a tool anymore. It felt like a voice, like something ancient was speaking through it. Not with words, but with memory. Stor groaned on the floor, half-conscious. Jace walked toward him and said nothing. The alien looked up, eyes wide with fear. You're not a man, he whispered. You're a curse. Jace looked down at the sword, and then at the stars above. No, he said softly. I think I'm the warning. The next morning, the wind over Corinne 4 blew harder than usual. It was dry and hot, but the air felt heavy, like something ancient had woken up beneath the surface. Jace stood quietly at the edge of a cliff, the sword strapped across his back. He didn't know where to go next, only that the sword was leading him somewhere. Velmira joined him, holding a scanner in one hand and a holographic map in the other. I've been studying the tremors that started when you activated the sword, she said. There's a signal. Something deep underground, farther north. Jace looked at the map. You think it's another ruin? Not just a ruin, Velmira said. It could be a vault, one the ancients sealed. Jace nodded slowly. Then let's go see. What they didn't want others to find. They traveled in silence for hours, across shattered lands and black glass fields, old battle sites, untouched for thousands of years. The land was dead, but the sword pulsed softly, like a heartbeat echoing from beneath. As they arrived at a jagged canyon, Valmira pointed to a large slab of metal sticking out from the rock. They climbed down carefully, each step echoing in the silence. When Jace's foot touched the metal, the ground shook. A blue light blinked from the slab, then a hidden door began to open. Dust poured out like a whisper from the past. Inside was not a cave. It was a command center. The walls were lined with old human tech, long powered down. But when Jace stepped inside, the lights flickered on, one by one, and a voice echoed through the room, cold and clear. "Welcome back, Commander," it said. Jace froze. "What?" Valmira stared at the ceiling. It knows you," the voice continued. "Please place the sword on the terminal to begin identity sync." Jace approached the glowing panel at the center of the chamber. He laid the sword across it carefully. The entire room lit up with a warm, pulsing glow. Screens came alive, showing images of Earth, ancient starships, and a fleet flying through fire. "Commander Jace Orion, descendant of High Marshal Orion Sol," the voice said. "Your DNA confirms leadership lineage," Valmira gasped. You are his blood." Jace shook his head. "I didn't even know who that was." A hologram appeared before them. It showed a man who looked just like Jace, only older, wearing armor that matched the sword's hilt design. The man's voice was clear and steady. "If you are seeing this, then my time has ended, and the galaxy stands on the edge again." He spoke of a war that consumed entire systems, an enemy made of shadows and corruption, and how the last survivors of humanity fled and hid pieces of their legacy. The sword was not a weapon alone. It was a beacon, a final call for help. Jace felt dizzy, his hands trembling. He had grown up thinking Earth was isolated, that humanity was young and weak. Now he learned his ancestors once led fleets across the stars. Now the stars were calling him back. Valmira stepped beside him, her voice soft. "You're the heir to a forgotten command. And the sword is not just metal, it's memory. It chose you because your blood still remembers." Suddenly, alarms rang through the chamber. "Unauthorized ships approaching," the AI warned. 3 strike craft from the Karen High Warlord." Jace's eyes narrowed. "They tracked us." Valmira pulled him behind a console. Outside, the canyon shook with the landing of enemy ships. Gregtor had returned, bruised, burned, and furious. He wanted revenge. And this time he brought a full unit. Jace gripped the sword again. But now it felt different, lighter, faster, almost like it wanted to be used. When he swung it once, the blue fire returned, brighter and hotter than before. The chamber's walls opened behind him, revealing old weapons and armor, all human tech, waiting for command. Jace strapped on a chest plate that locked itself into place like it had missed him. Valmira activated a defense grid, using old panels to raise energy walls across the entrance. The first blaster bolt hit and bounced off the shield, then a second, and then they broke through. Jace charged forward, sword glowing like a star. He didn't hesitate this time. Each swing cut through armor like paper. The flame curved and moved like it had its own eyes. The enemy was stunned, some dropping their weapons. Gregtor screamed in fury, rushing at Jace with twin axes. They clashed, sparks flew, but Jace's blade overpowered him in seconds. Gregtor fell, defeated once again, this time with fear in his voice. "You're no ordinary human," he whispered. Jace stood over him, sword raised but not striking. "No," he said calmly. "I am the heir of something you tried to bury." The fire in Jace's blade had faded, but the heat of war was just beginning to rise. Gregtor's defeat echoed through the canyons like thunder, and the soldiers who survived ran back with shaking hands and wide eyes. They spoke of a human who moved like light and wielded a sword that burned the air. They spoke of machines that came to life when he entered, and of an ancient vault that opened only for his blood. Their warlord did not believe them until he saw Gregtor's injuries with his own eyes. The High Warlord growled in rage. "He is not a hero," he said. "He is a signal of rebellion." Across the planet, the news spread. Some called Jace the Flame Bearer, others the ghost of the old empire. But not everyone feared him. In the shadows of the broken cities, small groups of outcasts and rebels listened. They had waited for change, and now they believed it had come, not in the form of a bomb, but in a man. Jace didn't ask for any of it. He sat quietly in the command vault with Valmira beside him. Dozens of old screens blinked with blue light, maps, messages, and star charts updated as the ancient systems came back online. "You've activated a ghost ship in orbit," Valmira said while watching a monitor. "It's been floating above us silent for 10,000 years. Jace looked at the glowing sword in his hand. "It's calling more than I understand," he said softly. The ship was huge, invisible to modern scanners. Now that the sword was awake, it had begun to respond. Jace could hear the humming in his bones when he slept. It was not just metal, it was memory reaching across time. Outside the vault, they began preparing defenses. Valmira organized a group of engineers and scientists who joined their cause. They worked with old machines, unlocked doors, and rebuilt broken drones. They called it the Last Hold, a fortress of rust and fire and hope. But peace was not coming. The High Warlord was furious, and his armies moved fast. Within 3 days, over 100 armored skimmers surrounded the region. They prepared to burn the ruins and bury Jace forever. Valmira stood before a wall of screens, reading intercepted signals. "They're coming," she said. "This is no warning, it's an execution." Jace strapped on the ancient armor that now fit him like skin. He tied the sword to his back and turned to her. "If this is how it starts, I won't run," he said. Valmira looked into his eyes and nodded. "You don't need to win this battle," she said. "You only need to survive it." And so the sky darkened with warships, thunder rolled without clouds, and the air trembled with engines. The enemy arrived not to fight, but to erase. To make sure the sword never shined again, the first fire began at dawn. Blaster beams rained from the sky like red comets. Energy shields flared, drones flew like angry birds. And at the center stood Jace, alone, waiting when the soldiers breached the walls. They found him standing in silence. He said nothing, only drew the sword and let it ignite. The fire leaped from the blade like it was alive again. It danced between his fingers and curved through the air like wind. He didn't swing it blindly. Every move was sharp, precise, like he had fought these battles before. But the truth was, he hadn't. The sword had. And now it was remembering. Through him, Valmira led her team from the rear, rerouting power and guiding turrets. They were outnumbered 20-1, but they held the line longer than anyone believed possible. Each time the enemy advanced, the sword pushed them back. Suddenly, a signal echoed through the vault, not a weapon this time, but a voice. "This is Captain Vara of the starship Seraphim." Responding to Beacon Alpha Zero, Valmira gasped. "That's a human call sign," Jace grinned. Breathless from battle, then we're not alone anymore. The sky cracked as the stars shifted, and there, beyond the clouds, a shape appeared, sleek, massive, and glowing with ancient power. The Seraphim had awakened, and it was coming home. Panic spread through the enemy ranks. Some dropped their weapons, others ran. Even the High Warlord felt fear crawling under his armor. He turned his ship around and disappeared into the sky. Jace dropped to one knee, the sword's fire dimming again. He looked up at the shining ship above. "It's not the war," he said. Softly, "It's only the warning before it." The sky had never looked like this before. Not on Karen 4, not in 1,000 years. A human starship, the Seraphim, floated above the planet like a ghost made of metal and fire. Its presence bent clouds and made the stars blink differently. Jace stood with the sword in his hand, flames no longer burning but warm. He stared at the ship, his heart pounding. It was not just a ship. It was a memory returned. The signal had reached it, and it had answered. Valmira's voice came through the vault's old comms. "We've made contact," she said. "The Seraphim's eye has fully activated. It's requesting a secure connection." Jace nodded and stepped toward the control panel. "I'll speak to it," he said. though part of him didn't know why it felt so right. When his hand touched the screen, a soft hum filled the air. The voice that answered was calm, female, and warm. "Welcome, Commander Orion," it said. "Your signal has been silent for 20,681 years," Valmyra whispered. In awe, "It still remembers your name." Jace cleared his throat, unsure what to say. "I'm not him, not exactly." The voice paused, then answered. "Blood holds memory, the flame remembers." A map appeared in front of them. Stars, fleets, broken worlds, and lost signals. Jace saw blinking red lights all over the galaxy. "What are those?" he asked. "Beacons left behind by the Exodus fleet," the AI replied. "Some are still active." Valmyra leaned closer. "That means others might have survived." Jace looked up at her. Other humans, and in that moment, he didn't feel so alone anymore. But the AI wasn't done. It projected a new image. Black ships with twisted designs, creeping across space like shadows. "These are the remnants of the Dark Swarm," the voice said. "The ones who ended the Golden Era. They are still out there." Jace clenched his jaw, the sword humming softly on his back. So this was never just about lifting a sword. He muttered. Valmyra nodded. "It's about restarting the fire they tried to kill." Down on the planet's surface, the aftermath of battle still burned. The High Warlord's forces were scattered, but not gone. He sat in a war tent, watching the Seraphim through a high lens. His claws tapped on the table in rage. "He is not just a man now," he said to his advisors. "He is a symbol, and symbols inspire armies." One advisor asked, "Shall we retreat?" The warlord shook his head. "No, we strike now, before others rise with him." While the enemy planned, Jace and Valmyra boarded a lift that took them deep into the earth. The Seraphim had sent coordinates to a second vault, one buried beneath an ancient mountain. Inside were rows of cryopods, filled with dust and faded memories. Humans frozen in time, untouched by war, waiting to wake again. "They were left behind," Jace said. "Walking between the pods. They were meant to be found by someone worthy." Valmyra placed her hand on one of the pods. "This one has a child," she said softly. "A baby." Jace turned to the console and activated the sequence. "Start revival protocols," he said. The lights flickered, and the systems whirred back to life. All across the chamber, lights turned green, one by one. Back on the surface, the sky suddenly turned dark, not from clouds, but from dozens of warships descending. The High Warlord had launched his full assault. He didn't come to test Jace. He came to end him. Valmyra's voice came through the come again. "They're surrounding the mountain. Too many to count." Jace took a breath, drawing the sword slowly. Then the Seraphim spoke. "Again, would you like me to deploy the Flame Guard?" Jace blinked. "What's the Flame Guard?" "Special defense units, designed for the heir of Orion's soul," the AI said calmly. Then the sky cracked, and light poured from above, from the belly of the Seraphim. Glowing pods dropped toward the surface. They hit the ground like comets, and from each one rose a soldier, armored in human tech. Glowing blue through the cracks, no blood, no voice, just loyalty built into their bones. The Flame Guard had returned. The battle that followed was like something from legend. Jace stood atop the mountain, sword burning like a piece of the sun. Valmyra watched from below as the Flame Guard pushed back the enemy ranks. The ground trembled, and the old fire of humanity rose again, in the heart of the fight. Jace saw the High Warlord break through the line. Their eyes met, and the Warlord shouted, "You are not a god." Jace answered with a calm voice. "No," he said, stepping forward. "I'm just a man with history on his side." And then the blade met steel, and the mountain echoed with fire. The mountain shook under their feet. Dust fell from the ceiling of the cryovault as battle thundered above. Flashes of fire lit the stone walls, and the echoes of war roared like waves crashing again and again. Outside, The seraphim circled in the sky like a silent guardian. Jace stood at the mouth of the mountain, sword glowing in his grip. The High Warlord stepped forward, armor cracked, eyes burning with hatred. "You are not chosen," the Warlord growled. "You are just a shadow of the past." Jace didn't speak. The fire on his blade spoke for him. Their weapons clashed in a burst of light and sound. Each strike from the Warlord was heavy and brutal. But Jace moved with speed the sword gave him. It wasn't just metal now. It was memory, energy, and something deeper. Each time the Warlord struck, the blade countered before Jace even thought. Below them, the Flame Guard fought with mechanical grace. Valmira led a group of rebels, alien engineers, and former soldiers who had joined Jace. She carried a plasma rifle and shouted orders. The defenders of the mountain held their line with fire, faith, and fear. But the enemy was endless. Waves of armored beasts stormed the ridges, firing blasters and screaming in rage. Then came the heavy warships, landing like giants, shaking the earth, and still, they pressed forward inside the mountain. Cryopods continued to open. Weak humans stumbled into the light, eyes wide, lungs shaking after centuries of sleep. Valmira and her team helped them stand, gave them water, wrapped them in heat blankets. "You're safe now," she told one mother who held her child close. He lit the flame again. Back on the mountain peak, the duel raged. The High Warlord landed a punch that knocked Jace backward. "Breaking stone. You are not worthy," he screamed. Jace stood, coughing, wiping blood from his mouth. "I don't need to be perfect," he said. "I only need to remember." With one final swing, he let the sword move as it wanted. Blue fire erupted, not from the blade, but from within the Warlord's armor. The ancient energy tore through him, not killing, but unmaking. The Warlord fell, his armor collapsing like rusted glass. He stared at Jace with wide, broken eyes. "What are you?" he whispered. Jace stepped forward, the fire wrapping around him like a cloak. "I am not your enemy," he said. "I am the spark of what you tried to bury." Behind him, the Flame Guard knelt in silence. Valmira climbed to his side, watching. The enemy soldiers below dropped their weapons, one by one. They stopped fighting, not from defeat, but from awe. All across Karen 4, screens lit up with the same image. A human holding a glowing sword above a broken mountain. A silent starship hovering above him like a crown. A moment that would become the first page of a new era. The Seraphim sent a final signal. A broadcast of Jace's DNA, the sword's activation, and the awakening of the cryovault. It echoed across the galaxy. To forgotten satellites, ancient beacons, and deep black stations that hadn't blinked in centuries. In the corners of space, lights turned on. Other ships began to stir. Other flames began to wake. Humanity, once silent, once lost, was returning. Valmira turned to Jace, her voice steady. "You've done it," she said. "You've started the return." Jace looked at the sky, then at the people below. "No," he said. "We've just reminded the galaxy who we were." He walked down the mountain slowly, not as a king, not as a god, but as a man holding the light of memory in his hands. The crowd parted for him. Some knelt, others wept. None dared look away. In his heart, he didn't feel like a hero. But when he passed the cryo children, when he saw their eyes filled with wonder, he knew that the fire was not his alone. It belonged to all who remembered what it meant to fight, not for power, but for a future. The Seraphim spoke once more. "Awaiting orders, Commander." Jace stared at the stars. "Let's go find the others," he said. "Let's bring them home." The sword pulsed one last time, and the stars, one by one, began to answer.